Imagine it's 1945. The sky is on fire. American heavy bombers are thundering over Germany and Japan in formations so big they blot out the sun. Below them, the last desperate defenders are scrambling everything they have left. Fuel is measured in liters. Pilots are measured in weeks of life expectancy, and every single mile per hour matters more than gold. This is the moment when the piston engine and the propeller reach their absolute breaking point. Engineers weren't designing aircraft anymore. They were forging miracles out of aluminum, steel, and pure panic. For 80 years, aviation nuts have screamed at each other across bars, forums, and YouTube comments. What was the fastest propeller-driven fighter that actually flew in World War II? Today we end the argument. Not with opinions, not with restored warbirds doing airshow passes, with cold, hard, documented numbers from official flight test reports, wartime performance tables, and declassified evaluations. These are the machines that actually tore through the sky at 400, 450, almost 500 miles per hour while people were shooting at them. Every single one saw production. Most tasted gunpowder. And every single one has a story that will make your jaw drop. So buckle up, hit that bell, and let's rip the sound barrier a little bit. With propellers, let us start with the airplane that still makes grown men cry when they talk about what could have been. North American P-51H Mustang, the final, ferocious, lightweight angel of the entire Mustang family. This wasn't just another letter after the dash. This was a complete ground-up redesign. Engineers looked at the already legendary P-51D and said, "We can do better. We can do insane." They carved 1,500 pounds out of the airframe. New laminar flow wing with an even lower drag coefficient. A brand new Packard-built Merlin V16509. With water alcohol injection that screamed out over 2,200 horsepower for short bursts. Taller tail, bubble canopy, redesigned cooling system. Everything shaved, polished, and lightened until the airplane looked almost fragile. It wasn't. On a cold day in February 1945, a test pilot pushed an MP-51H into level flight at 25,000 feet and watched the airspeed indicator kiss 487 miles per hour, 784 kilometers per hour. That is still, to this day, the fastest level flight speed ever officially recorded by any operational piston engine fighter in history, 487 miles per hour. With a wooden propeller, the P-51H rolled faster than a Spitfire, climbed like a homesick angel, and still had the range to escort B-29s all the way to Tokyo and back on internal fuel. 555 were delivered before the Japanese surrender. Not one fired a shot in anger. By the time they reached squadrons, the war was over. Imagine being a Japanese or German pilot in the spring of 1945, hearing rumors of a new Mustang that could outrun anything you had. And then the atomic bomb falls, and you never even get to see it. That's the P-51H. The fastest ghost of World War II, now crossed the Atlantic to a collapsing Third Reich, where engineers were literally working by flashlight in bombed-out factories. Picture this, a fighter with an engine in the nose and another engine behind the cockpit, driving a pusher propeller through a long shaft under the pilot's seat. No wing-mounted engines, no torque, no asymmetric yaw, just pure, brutal, straight-line speed. Meet the Dornier Do 335 file. Aero, 2 liquid-cooled Daimler Benz, DB603 engines, each producing almost 1,800 horsepower. One pulls, one pushes. The result, a 760 km Adoham Patratus Dujupulum Pod MPH monster that looked like a shark with propellers at both ends. Captured examples after the war were flown by American, British, and French test pilots. Every single report says the same thing. Terrifyingly fast, beautifully stable, heavy firepower, and genuinely scary to land because of the rear propeller. One French test pilot wrote, "If the Do 335 had appeared in 1943, the daylight bombing campaign would have become unsustainable." Only 37 were completed. Allied bombers made sure most never left the factory. But the ones that flew proved that German desperation still had genius in it. Somewhere over southern England in early 1945, 4 P-51 Mustangs are cruising at 38,000 feet looking for trouble. They find it. One lone German fighter climbs above them, turns, and dives. 30 seconds later, 2 Mustangs are falling in flames. One is trailing glycol, and the German is gone. That German was flying a Focke-Wulf TA-152H. The ultimate evolution of Kurt Tank's genius. Take an FW-190, stretch the wings to almost 48 feet, give it a pressurized cockpit, a Jumo 213E with a 2-stage supercharger, an MW-50 boost, and send it up where the air is so thin most engines choke. At 42,000 feet, the TA-152H was untouchable. 469 miles per hour in level flight at altitude. Better climb, better turn, better everything. As long as you stayed above 35,000 feet. On paper, fewer than 150 were built. In reality, probably less than 60 ever flew. but the few pilots who got their hands on one became legends. The airplane was so good that when the war ended, the Americans and Soviets fought over the blueprints like dogs over a bone. Back to the United States, where Republic Aviation took their big, ugly, beloved P-47 Thunderbolt, the Jug, and said, "We need something that can catch me to 62s. The answer was the P-47M, same massive R2800 double wasp, but now with a new CH-5 turbocharger, water injection, and every unnecessary ounce stripped out. Top speed, 472 miles per hour. Only 130 were built. All sent to the 56th Fighter Group, Zemst's Wolfpack, the most successful fighter group in the European theater. They took these sprint version Jugs and went jet hunt. The P-47M was temperamental. Engines exploded. Superchargers failed. But when everything worked, nothing with a propeller could touch it. It was the fastest Thunderbolt that ever lived, and it spent its short combat career chasing shadows at 400 miles per hour. Now let us talk about the airplane that should have owned the Pacific if the war had lasted 6 more months. Grumman, F-8F, Bearcat. Grumman took the same R2800 engine that powered the Hellcat and Corsair, and wrapped the smallest, lightest, meanest airframe possible around it. The result looked like a barrel with wings, but it climbed to 10,000 feet in 94 seconds. Faster than a P-51D, with drop tanks. 420mm cannons or 6.50 cals, insane roll rate, and a top speed of 455 to 460 miles per hour in clean configuration. The Bearcat reached operational squadrons in May 1945. 24 aircraft were aboard carriers when Japan surrendered. Zero combat, but in the late 1940s and 1950s it dominated air races and set time to climb records that stood for decades. Darrell Grenemeyer took a highly modified civilian Bearcat to 519 miles per hour in 1969. But even stock military versions were pushing 460 plus in the right hands. Pilots who flew both the Bearcat and the Mustang usually said the same thing. The Mustang is a scalpel. The Bearcat is a chainsaw. Let's drop down low, where the air is thick and the flak is thicker. England, summer of 1944. V-1 buzz bombs are raining on London. RAF pilots are screaming after them at treetop height. The fastest, most successful interceptor. Hawker, Tempest, MKV, Napier Sabre engine producing over 2,400 horsepower on war emergency power. Thin elliptical wing, and a vicious appetite for anything that flew low and fast. 435 to 440 miles per hour at sea level. Faster than almost anything else down on the deck. Tempest pilots shot down or tipped over more than 800 flying bombs. When they weren't chasing drones, they were shredding trains, tanks, and FW-190s that made the mistake of getting slow near the ground. Many RAF pilots still argue the Tempest, not the Spitfire, was the best all-round British piston fighter of the war. And then there's the Spitfire that made German pilots rethink their life choices. Supermarine Spitfire, Mk-14. Take the most beautiful airframe ever drawn, rip out the Merlin, and stuff in a 2-speed Griffin, producing over 2,050 horsepower. Bigger tail, stronger fuselage, 5-bladed rotor propeller. The first time in 1944 vintage Luftwaffe pilot tried to extend away from what he thought was just another Spitfire. The Mk-14 was on his tail before he finished the thought. 446 sampai 450 mph rocket climb rate, and the same sweet handling that made the Spitfire famous. It slaughtered high-altitude reconnaissance, RU-86, petaseconds, shredded FW-190s, and gave me 262 pilots a nasty surprise more than once. Finally, the airplane that started the late war panic, Focke-Wulf FW-190D9 Dora. Take the brutal radial-engined FW-190 that had been mauling Spitfires since 1941. RIP, out the BMW 801, and shoehorn in a liquid-cooled Jumo 213A inline engine. The nose had to be extended almost 3 feet. Hence the nickname, Long-Nosed Dora. The result was an FW-190 that could fight at 25,000 feet without gasping for air. 426 sampai 430 mph. Blistering roll rate, and the same rugged airframe that could take 20mm cannon hits and still bring its pilot home. Over 700 Doras were built in the last 9 months of the war, and they gave Allied pilots absolute fits right up to the final day. So here we are. 8 machines that represent the absolute edge of what was possible with pistons, superchargers, high-octane fuel, and human desperation. P-51H Mustang, 487 mph, the ghost that arrived after the party. Do 335 file 474 miles per hour. The push-pull monster that never got its chance, P-47M. Thunderbolt minus 472 miles per hour. The Jet Chaser TA-152H minus 469 miles per hour. The high-altitude Emperor F-8F. Bearcat 455 to 460 miles per hour. The Climber King Spitfire Mk-14, 446 to 450 miles per hour. Beauty with Fangs Tempest MKV, 435 to 440 miles per hour. Low-level Terror, FW190D9, minus 426 to 430 miles per hour. The last laugh of the Luftwaffe. 61 miles per hour separate the slowest from the fastest on this list. 61. That's nothing in a 400 miles per hour world. Every single one of those miles per hour was bought with blood, sweat, and brilliant minds working under air raid sirens. So now I want to know from you, right now, in the comments, if you had to pick one of these aircraft for a single mission on the last day of the war, knowing you might not come back, which one are you strapping into? The untouchable high-altitude TA-152, the insane straight-line speed of the DOH-335, the lightweight Lightning P-51H that never got to prove itself? Or are you going low and fast in a Tempest because sometimes raw speed isn't everything? Drop your choice below. Argue, fight, defend your pick, because 80 years later, we're still having the same argument those pilots had in 1945. Only now we get to do it from the safety of our couches. These weren't just airplanes. They were the final, screaming roar of the propeller age. And when the jets took over, something beautiful died forever.